It's almost about that time. Right about now.
Right about now. Funk, bunk, 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 soul brother.
Nifemi Aluko, welcome back to the Right About Now podcast.
Thank you, John Small.
So
Always happy to hear your voice, and glad to be back to do this a second time.
you're one of my earliest listeners. Like you reached out to me in the early days of my podcast and were so positive, and it was so nice to like hear really good feedback because you put a podcast in the world just like you put a book in the world, and you don't know who's going to read it or listen to it. So I always appreciated you.
For sure. And I'm glad. When I reached out, then it was almost like you never know, like when you like something and you're listening to it and you're just like, okay, let me just tell this person like I'm really enjoying this. I think I was writing my first book then, and just like having that feedback on the journey, your journey, other people's journeys to writing books, it was just like a very good place for me to kind of come back. There was like some comfort, right, of like hearing these stories. So when I reached out and I was like, hey, can I be on your podcast? And you were like, yes. I was like, oh shit.
Like, I'm a writer now.
Yeah.
Well, you've got such a great story, and so I encourage everybody to go back. I'll link to it, but to the first Nifemi episode, because we talk about your origin story and how you came to this country and all that stuff. But now you're like you've been here a few years. You're living in downtown LA now. I think when we first talked, you were up in the Bay Area.
Yep.
And you've got your fourth book coming out.
Yeah, fourth book.
So anybody who's sitting there being like, oh man, I know I have a book in me, but I just, I don't have time. Just listen to Nifemi comes here and you've cranked out 4 books. That's amazing.
Yep.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's, the main thing I tell people is like, I never had the ambition, like growing up, never had the ambition to be a writer. It was never anything that was in my mind. I have a lot of friends that read a lot of books and they have like their favorite author, and growing up they're like, man, one day I'll write a book, right? That was never my journey, right? It just kind of happened. So sometimes I think the advantage I have is I never like built it up to like this, I have to write this like amazing book. I kind of just walked my way into like my first book, and I was like, can I do it again? I did it again. And then, the third book was more something I planned on releasing as just like an ebook on my website, until I started writing it and I was like, oh, this is a full book. And then I did that one out. And then the fourth book is a prequel to the second book, which was like a sci-fi novel. So, but it all started with music. And I think you're a music guy yourself. I know.
Well, yeah, I got my music. I think we all, yes, I am a music guy. We both bonded over music and mixtapes and a lot of hip hop, and you even turned me on to some really interesting Nigerian artists.
Yeah.
But your book is based in music, right? Your main character is a musician. Talk a little bit about him.
Yeah. So the book is called Musta's Mixtape. So just to give you a prequel, like in 2021, I published Toffee's Divide. So that was my first book. Novel, exactly. It's the second book, but my first novel. And the whole thing about Toffee's Divide was, it all started off as me trying to make a mixtape, right? And I kind of grew up in that, not era, but where albums were like this concept albums. A lot of like the rap albums I was listening to had like a full concept behind it, right? And if you look at an album like Pink Floyd, the Dark Side of the Moon, there's like this kind of concept, right? So I always like this whole concept behind an album, instead of just like piecing songs together. So I decided like, okay, I'm gonna go write a short story, right? Quick short story, and get back to my music making. And that short story is what like evolved over like 4 years, 5 years, and now then became Toffee's Divide, right?
Mm.
So published that, and Toffee, excuse me, Toffee's Divide is about this writer that is in this very technologically based city in 2049 that uses his writing as a way to kind of bring the city together. So that's kind of the general premise. But while he's writing, he gets this mixtape, right,
Mm.
to write to. So it's like
Mm.
a mixtape of like 12 tracks, and someone called Musta gave him this mixtape, and it was like, hey, just write down your thoughts, get away from the screens and write down your thoughts. So Musta's mixtape is the prequel to how this mixtape was made that
Interesting.
eventually gets to Toffee. So it's kind of like Musta's mixtape leading up to Toffee's
So
Divide.
so we find out a little bit who Musta is.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Yep.
That's a great. Did you always have in mind that you were going to write a prequel when you were writing the first book?
No, I had no idea. I think when I got to the end of the book, I remember, you get to the end and there's always this feeling, and I felt it this time around, where you're completing something. It's hard to let go. It's kind of like it's a weird sense of loss. At least that's how I feel. There's this weird sense of loss, like, oh man, like I was so attached to doing this thing, and sitting down and writing and trying to put this puzzle together. There's a story, and now that I've gotten to a point where it's like it's sealed, no more changes to the manuscript. Now it's in layouts. Now we're getting to like the book design and marketing. So there's this sense of loss. So when I was writing Toffee's Divide, I know I was getting to that point, like there's nothing else to write in this book. Like at this point, I'll be forcing stuff. And my editor was like, I think I was already at that point where I started thinking, oh, what am I going to write next? Right.
Yeah.
And then I was talking to the editor. I was like, yeah, there's this character, Musta, that, a lot of people think Toffee is me because Toffee is like an engineer that writes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So most people are like, oh, you're an engineer, you're the writer, you must be Toffee. But I was like, there's this guy called Musta that is actually a musician that I kind of resonate with a little bit more. And I remember my editor was like, oh yeah, that would be cool. It does like a mixtape, right? And that was kind of like the seed of the idea. But this was all the way back in 2021. And then I think by summer 2022, I started writing Musta's mixtape on my phone, which was what
I want to talk about that. So you have an interesting process. You write on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a lot of people do that. First of all, I don't think I could do that because I'm so bad with my thumbs. But if I could do it, if I was a millennial, I think they're better at it than me. But tell me about that. Why do you write on your phone, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so I think, how did it come about? So I started writing in general. I started writing a lot more when I was creating a blog for my business, right? So I have a consulting advisory business for companies that are trying to expand in West Africa, East Africa, US based companies. So, I kind of was writing blogs around, just basic, how do you expand in Africa? How do you find partners? What countries do you prioritize? And I had a schedule on a content calendar on how to get the content out there. But every time I sat down to write, I'll get so like intimidated by the screen, the wide screen, the white page. And I'm not a fast typer, right?
Okay.
I'm not fast. So I'll rather actually write it down in a notepad just to like get my thoughts down, boom, 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 and then retype it because I'm slow when it comes to typing. And then there was just a day that I was just like, man, let me just write this stuff on my phone, right? And I think,
are you writing in your notes app? Where are you writing it?
so initially I wasn't even using a notepad then. Initially, I was so intimidated, right, that I thought to myself that I'm gonna act like I'm sending someone a message. So it was like
Oh,
in WhatsApp, or maybe I was like acting like I was sending like my sister or my brother a message just to reduce the the
yeah,
barrier, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
I typed it out like, what would I say to them if they asked me this question about expanding in Africa or something, right?
Mm.
And I typed out like the skeleton, boom, boom, and then just copied and then pasted into like Google Keep, right? So eventually I started doing that over and over, and I was, oh, this works. And in general, I'm just with time, I just became like a note taker, like a
Mm.
digital note taker. So anything, if I read something, I'm taking down notes, putting it in my notepad, and even planning my day. I use my notepad all the time. Like the night before, kind of have my task for the day after, make sure I'm going through it. So me and my notepad were like this.
Yeah.
um,
When you
so
say notepad, you mean the notes app on your
yes, yes, yes. The notes
yeah.
app on my phone. Mainly, I use an Android, so it's a Google Keep, right?
Keep it.
I've used Notion, I've used like Obsidian and all these other ones, but I just
You
use
like
very. It doesn't matter the type you use. Is
yeah,
it's just
yeah. As long as you have, but this makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, when I think about it, because most of us, especially if you're a little bit younger, do most of our writing on our phone. Like
Mhm.
we're doing, I mean, in terms of like when we're just casually writing, texting or whatever. And so it makes sense that why would you then make your computer be the place where you actually do your like serious writing when
Yeah,
you're so used to writing on your phone? That makes
yeah,
a lot of sense to me. Like
yeah,
if I think,
and the way it works for me is first that the first thing was that in reducing the intimidation of like the phone seems so casual, right? So it's not like, oh, I have to sit down and write this masterpiece.
yeah,
No, it's just like I'm sitting down on my couch. Let me just quickly like write this stuff for 10 minutes. The second thing is the screen is so small that you don't have time to kind of look back. Oh, what did I say in this sentence before? And sometimes my challenge with like writing on my computer is as soon as I see like a squiggly line, I go back to that word. I'm like, oh, what is wrong there? And now you're now writing and editing at the same time, which is not the most efficient thing to do.
yeah,
So the small screen also helps because you're just like, it's just kind of a brain dump. You're just writing. Um, then you can write anywhere. You
yeah,
don't, there's no like, oh man, I wish I was sitting on my laptop, at my desk. No, if you're waiting for the bus, okay, let me just quickly bring out this phone. And
mm,
while I'm waiting for dinner, let me just bring out the phone and do my 10 minutes. So for Musta's mixtape, I actually I set a like a creative challenge. So
hmm,
I was like, I'm gonna write for 15 minutes every day, weekday, no weekends, every weekday for I believe it was 3 months, right? So I was just doing it. I had the structure in an Excel file
hmm,
of like, okay, every 2 weeks, make sure you look at this Excel file to make sure you're going with the journey, right? I kind of mapped it out to that typical like
see it out.
hero's journey kind of thing.
Yeah,
But um I'll kind of look at that Excel file, come back, write, and just for the entire week, I already have my direction and I'm just going ahead. Um, and for me, it takes me like 15, 10, 15 minutes to get into like the flow of
yeah,
writing. So by the time I'm hitting that 15-minute timer, I'm like, man, it's finally getting good. But to stay disciplined, I kind of stop. But what I do is I'll write the beginning of the next thing
uh,
so
that's
that
Hemingway used to do that. That's an Ernest Hemingway trick.
okay.
Yeah, you're in good. You're in good. Always write the first thing. Yeah, that's a great idea. Always write the first thing you're going to write tomorrow. Yeah,
Yeah. So like the next day, it's not like, oh man, when did I stop? I already know because the flow of writing already gives you that benefit, right? Of like you're in the flow. So just it's like a alley oop. Like just give me like what I'm going give my next day the best opportunity to succeed.
Wow.
And so I did that, and it was nice because this was also 2022. My wife and I had just moved. We moved to Paris, so we were living in Paris for like 4 months.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was very nice because I did. It was very will I say idealistic because I kind of mapped out some of the these famous Parisian cafes,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of mapped them out. And then I'll go out there. I'll find out, oh, James Baldwin wrote here. Okay, cool.
Oh,
I'm gonna
wow.
write here for 15 minutes. Oh,
That's
Hemingway
so
wrote
great.
here. All right, cool. I'm gonna write that for 15 minutes. I'll take a picture. So there's also the part of the process for me that I documented that is different from the final product of the book, but there's the like my notepad has each day the location I was, the picture of the cafe, who wrote there. So that is also just like raw material for other things that I could do with that type of content. So it was an interesting process, but I'll tell you, by the time I got to, you know, I compiled everything, put it in a Word document. I found some gaps in there. I spent 5 days plugging out those gaps, printed it out. By the time we got back to Los Angeles, and I did one read through, right? I read through, kind of marked it up, and I just left it for like like 1 year. I just left it alone. I just
Oh,
left.
really?
Yeah. I just left it.
You were tired of it, or you needed a break?
I think I needed a break, needed to focus on other things like my business, just like making income.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Your wife's like, he's not paying the bills. I
yeah,
love the writing
yeah.
here.
This
Love that you're
book,
Hemingway in France, but we need to eat.
yeah, I need to eat. So, I kind of put it. Also, there was just the part that I was just like, yeah, let me just leave it alone. There was no rush, right? So I left it, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with it. At the same time, I was interested in, I was getting interested in blockchain technology. So,
Uh-huh.
the whole NFT thing, I was, in a few communities. So I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I apply this to my publishing
Mm.
life? How do I apply blockchain technology to my publishing life? So, I launched a token called
Hmm.
Toffee's Domes, right?
Yeah.
Based on Toffee's Divide, and use that as a way to crowd fund the publishing process for
Oh, wow.
Musta's mixtape. So,
You're
launched.
so creative with yeah, especially using the new technology
Mhm.
in a way. So
Yeah.
okay, so you had it. Okay, I mean, this is so beyond my kind of Gen X understanding. I mean, I know what blockchain is,
Yep.
sort of, but I mean, were you able to reach a lot of people through
Um,
doing that?
I think I reached a lot of people within the blockchain Web3 community, right?
Mm.
Um, and there was a lot of excitement around it initially in 2021, in 2022, I'd finished the manuscript, right? So I finished the
Right.
manuscript in my phone by, let's call it August. And then September, I started, creating like the contract. I learned how to like write a contract myself, and I'm doing all this stuff because I'm trying to learn also. So I learned
Mm.
how to write the contracts. I, created a website. I was like, all right, people can kind of mint the token. I had 405 tokens because Toffee's Divide had 405 pages. So kind
Mm.
of very, symbolic kind of stuff. But unfortunately, in I think like November 2022, there was the Sam
Sam Fried,
Friedman,
yeah.
yeah, whoever
Yeah.
that guy's name is, yeah, he
So,
just messed up
yeah.
the whole scene. So people were interested, and then all of a sudden they were like, "Crypto, nah, bro, I'm not going near that." So
Yeah.
for like end of November 2022, leading up to 2023, everything just died down. So like I was kind of picking up, people were
Yeah.
interested, people were curious, but by the time that whole thing happened, everything was out. So the only people left were the people that were really like in the like that really cared about blockchain and Web3 and decentralization, which is a small number of people, right? And
Yeah.
then
That apparently keeps coming back. Every
yeah,
time we think it's back.
it's
Yeah.
back. Yeah, it's back. It goes away. It comes back again. But the challenge there was like there's a small group of people that care that much about blockchain, and then there's a smaller group of people that care about art and blockchain. And then within that, there's a smaller group of people that care about literary art because most people care more about visual art, right? Which
Yeah.
sometimes makes it hard for writers because ours is just like the word, right? The stuff that most people connect with is visual. So, and now, it made a very tiny group of people. But towards the end of last year, I found a way to connect my contract to a way people can pay with their credit card. So
Hmm.
you can still pay with your credit card, but it then mints your token to the blockchain and links it to your email, right? So that was kind of like a compromise to kind of also get like more mass appeal people into the let's say the Web3 community. So I launched the campaign for Musta's mixtape, I think December 19th, 2023, for a 1 month campaign. Raised about, I think, close to 2 ETH, 2 to 3 ETH at that point, close to $10,000.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so, and that's enough for me to, pay my editor, pay copy editing, cover design, book layouts, and also ship the books to people. So, I'm using the approach of like sell it before you make it, right?
Hmm.
So I already have like 200 people that are waiting for the book.
That's
I
awesome.
send it out to them, and then I publish it on Amazon, and people can buy it there also. So very
Is there so
interesting.
tell me, yeah, it's super interesting approach. Tell me what the people who invest or that give you money through blockchain, are they is it like a crowdfunding thing where they get something in return, a piece of the profits of the book, or are they more like just fans, like patrons
Yeah,
supporting you?
I
What is
think
the relationship?
is the approach is more patron
Hmm.
fans,
Supporting you,
people supporting. So it's a lot of like friends, a lot of family, a lot of people that have just kind of seen my journey over the last 3 4 years, and what they're getting in return is more, you know, there are different tiers, right? So the first one is like support one book, right? And
yeah.
what was one book? You get a signed copy, you get your name in the acknowledgments. I do plan on releasing content, exclusive content.
Yep.
For instance, I'm making a mixtape to go with this book, and those people will get access to content like that. So it's more of
Is it a
with
mixtape of your music or people like
no,
curated music?
my music. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Um, the challenge with the whole giving people, it would be nice to give people, and I thought about it, give people a percentage of like publishing royalties. That would be
Mm.
cool. Like if I could do that, that would be really pushing it and trying to be innovative, and it's something I thought about. But then there was this whole challenge of like SEC and what is considered a security, especially right after what happened with SBF. So it was
Yeah.
hard to go out and start saying, oh, invest in this and you get X in return. I
Yeah.
just kind of kept it simple, like I'm going to ship you a book. That's what you
That's a
get.
great idea. That's a great idea. I should have done that with my book. Like to if people want to source it, yeah, to help me fund it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
get a book and just be part of the because everybody, especially your family and friends, everybody wants to be
Part.
supportive.
Yeah.
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 It's a really I mean, that's the way you raise money for a business too, the family and
Exactly.
friends family and friends around.
Exactly.
I want to go back to the writing on the cell phone for a minute, or writing on your smartphone. So for people who are considering doing this, were there any things that you, after doing this for a while, that you learned that, like challenges that you had doing that maybe like things that you learned, like, oh, this made it easier, just basically if people are thinking about doing it that way, any kind of suggestions you can give
Yeah.
about, yeah.
From the two sets, right? There's the in process, right? And then
Yep.
there's the after process. So the in process, the main thing is your phone can easily distract you, right? That's one of the biggest challenges is even if you, when you're writing on your laptop, like if your phone is right next to you, like that's like a big distraction, just going back and forth, the pings and everything. So while you're writing on your phone, you're seeing messages. So what I do, I put my phone on airplane mode when I'm writing, just for like
Yeah.
the first, just like, okay, I'm going to time box this thing. It's 10:32 now. I'm going to write till 10:55, right? And I'm putting my phone on airplane mode and just put everything out of your mind. All you're doing is writing, getting it out. So I'll say the biggest thing is reducing the distraction from the phone, mainly by putting it on airplane mode, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there's another way you could do it. Maybe do not
Yeah,
disturb.
I have it. Well, in my iPhone, we have something called focus, do not disturb
Yeah,
focus
yeah,
mode.
exactly. Yeah. So for me, I just kind of use the old school, just airplane,
Yeah.
boom.
The only time that you are old school is
Yeah,
when you're
yeah,
doing
exactly. Because
anything
now,
else.
even on the plane, now you can connect. There's Wi-Fi on the plane. Back
Yeah,
in
so
the
it's not,
days, that used to be the one place you could just escape
they
from.
get you. Yeah. All right. So but it's important. Yeah. That's a very good point. I mean, my phone is the most distracting, one little visit to Instagram and you could be gone for 45 minutes
Yep,
without even.
yep. Um, and then that would be the main thing. Make sure you're saving it. Make sure,
Yeah. I would imagine I'd be so worried that I would lose my phone. So make sure it's going to the cloud or
yes,
something. Right?
yes.
Yeah.
Make sure it's going. And I save my stuff. Google Keep. Okay, one thing. But I also have I also use Obsidian, so I kind of transfer stuff also, just so that I
Mhm.
have an extra place, redundancy. Um,
Yep.
the second part is now, and this is feedback I got from my development editor. So my development editor was looking through it. She was like, "Man, I love that you did this whole thing on your phone, but I can tell that you did it on your phone, right?" Because
Like that.
yeah, because there were a lot of like single lines, right?
Uh-huh.
A lot of like just short sentences, just back to back,
Yeah.
back, 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 back.
Yeah. Like
Which,
a text. Yeah.
yeah. So I had to, through the editing process, like massage that, kind of bring sentences together, try to, it depends on how you want to write it. With the one liner, they're good because it's punchy. It's just like a
Yeah.
consistent hit, right?
Yeah.
But if there's a part of your story that you want it to kind of just keep flowing,
Right. That could be distracting. Yeah.
exactly. So that was the only feedback that made me think like, oh yeah, it's obvious I wrote this on the phone because of just these, like, when you upload it into like a Word document or Google Doc, and you just see like a series of like one lines and space in between, then you're like, okay, yeah, that's the phone.
Unless, unless it's dialogue. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It does that. Yeah. It would look, I guess that would be hard
Yeah.
to read. Although there's something kind of like interesting about, things that are written on a phone. I mean, people might also read it on a phone, right?
Exactly.
So it might be like almost a new way of consuming. I mean, we have this old paradigm like, oh, you read books on, in
Paper.
in print, in
Mm-hmm.
paper, or even you read them on your Kindle, but they look like paper. But the thing is, most of us spend most of our time reading the phone,
Yep.
right? I mean, I read the New York Times on my phone. I even stopped getting my New Yorker subscription in paper, which is because I read it on the phone. So what was the point of getting the New Yorker like on paper, like Save the
Yep.
Tree? And so why wouldn't you read a novel on the phone? Anyway, I think this is really cool. I don't know if I'm the right guy to do it because like I said, I'm like with my thumbs, I'm always it makes my kids crazy. Like when they're trying to get me to type something and I'm always getting it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're very dexterous on your thumbs, that's great.
Yeah.
And then I guess some people have keyboards that they attach to their phone. I don't know,
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah, I think
Um,
if even like I started writing a newsletter every week.
a Substack.
Oh man, so I've I created a Substack. I haven't done it.
Mm-hmm.
I created this one is just on my website. I use ConvertKit, right? But I keep going back and forth. Like I'm like I need to get more active on Substack.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it depends.
because
If you have on ConvertKit, if you have your subscribers already, sometimes it's hard to get them to move over to another platform.
But I
I
like
have a
what
lot of
Substack is doing with the notes, and
yeah.
yeah, I think they're really doing something really nice there for writers. I know you're on there.
I'm on there, but I'm terrible about keeping it, like contribute, like doing, because again, it's another piece of content that I'm doing for free.
Yep.
This podcast is for free.
Yeah.
I don't charge anybody for this podcast, and I can't. I'm like keep constantly giving things to people for free. It's a tricky balance of like, how do I get myself paid? You can get subscribers on Substack.
Yes.
It's just,
yeah.
you have to be very consistent with your.
This is a very interesting point you raised. This whole thing of this era we're in of constant content creation, right? Where
Yeah.
finding that balance between, we went through the whole content is king. Does creates value for people. Just create value for people. Eventually, they'll come to you, and then you can, find your 1,000 fans,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that thing is hard. Like, we could talk about that, but even from a business perspective, right? Even for my consulting business, where it's more B2B, right? So I'm literally trying to lock down big deals, right? This is not like a B2C kind of thing. So, you have like 3 to 5 big deals a year, you're good, right?
Yeah.
But before you get to that point of signing a deal, you have to provide free value in a sense of like guiding the person through their decision making, helping them understand the alternatives and all that kind of stuff. And then you find you're on one consultation call, a second consultation call, a third, and fourth.
It adds up.
At some point, you're like, all right, when are we going to sign this deal?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have equivalent with, I have a B2B business on the side where I'm doing podcast production for businesses. And it's the same thing. There's a lot of meetings, a lot of, should I really do this? And what about doing it this way? And I can't tell you how many times it doesn't actually happen.
Yep.
And which is, I don't know if I'm just bad at closing a deal or what, but I just think maybe that's the nature of business.
Yeah.
And, so it's like that's a fine balance of how much do you give for free before you feel comfortable asking for money. I always feel, I have a weird thing, and I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I have a little bit of a problem asking people for money, which is just my own thing that I need to get over. It seems like you don't really have that reservation of saying, hey, I'm starting this book. Please help me fund it.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but what's the feeling? I feel embarrassed to ask for money. Yeah.
But
that's also, I should value myself. I should value my work. I mean, I think to
be honest, I have a similar thing, right? I have a similar thing the way I grew up. There's some pride in terms of like, going to ask people for stuff, it's not like in our like nature, right? Even just like my family. Family culturally is not something we do. I found myself that I've had to push myself outside of my comfort zone, and it's so uncomfortable. Oh my God!
But then when people turns out don't mind if they feel like you're offering, if they feel like they're supporting you in something that is valuable.
Yep.
So I think it's something that we just have to get over. But some people are so good at it. I mean, they really are. Like they just don't mind asking people for money.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get in that mindset, but it'll be a continual battle for me.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah, but you're good at it. Well, okay, you also used AI, right? Talk to me about how you used AI.
All right, so I've used AI to in different ways, just playing around, right? Making images, making videos. So I've used it to make music videos for some of the songs I make. I've used it to, I did like a remix of like a scene in The Matrix, just
Oh,
playing around.
yeah.
Um, but I've never used it to write a in my stories, right?
Hmm.
The challenge I find, I'll tell you about the challenges and I'll tell you how I use it. The challenges I find with using AI for music or writing is it hasn't solved the problem, at least for me, of keeping me in a flow state, right?
Hmm.
The reason I write, make music, and I enjoy it is because I eventually get into like this flow state, right?
Yeah.
And where
I
it's
bet.
like, oh man, I'm in the page,
Zone. You're in the zone.
I'm in the zone.
You're in the matrix.
Yeah.
And everything is slowed down. The numbers, you can see everything.
Everything is the music, everything. I'm in it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
With AI and just the basic what we large language models of Chat GPT kind of thing.
Hmm.
There's the back and forth of the prompting. Oh, let me
Yeah.
think about something. Let me go type. You type it out. It gives you something to think about. Think
Then you have to
about it.
basically.
And
Yeah.
half of the time, I'm sorry, it's getting better now. Half of the time, the stuff is just creating like stuff that is
Yeah.
it's just adding flowery words that is just like, just tell me what I need to know.
Yeah.
So that back and forth, initially it was nice, like, oh, let me find a quick way to do a search. But because of this back and forth that keeps taking me out of this flow, I end up just saying, nah, I just want to write. Right.
Hmm.
So until that, I feel like for a lot of people that are creating, until that piece that is solved, where a lot of us that create, we do want to get into this flow state. I feel like that's why a lot of us do it, because of the experience of getting into this thing. Until that part is solved, I still want to do it, right? Now, from an output perspective, if all you care about is the output, if all you care about is the blog post or the end of the book or whatever it is, then you go ahead and use it. Go ahead and use it just to create the output. So I do use it for a lot for my business. So things like I need to write a proposal,
Yeah.
boom, boom, boom. Like just knock that out. Like help me out with this. Help me with this image. But when I'm doing stuff like writing, it's like asking ChatGPT to journal for you. Like, come on. Like it's not gonna
It doesn't know you're.
you need to process it yourself, right? So the way I used it in this book for Musta's Mixtape was I was trying to, when I was about to launch the crowdfunding campaign, right? I needed to make a video. And before, the way I used to make videos, like I'll have like a script. I've done it a few times on Indiegogo, but I'll have like, okay, someone asking me a question, and then I'll have to like go through it and then do all this editing. And when I have a script, I'll write down a script of what I want to say. And by the time I'm recording, this recording is like 7 minutes long, and I just wanted it to be 3 minutes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I have to edit the whole thing, and then that becomes a whole thing. But this time around, I literally just went in. I was like, "Hey, I want to create like a um, video asking people to support my campaign. It's about this book. I want it to be 3 minutes long. Use the average human speech speed as your gauge. Give me give me a script."
Hmm.
And it gave me a script, and when I read it out, it was 3 minutes precisely, right? So that
Wow.
something like that is very
Yeah.
useful because it can do it better than I can do it. It can estimate like human speech speed, and these are the number of words that should be in your script if you want to stick to 3 minutes.
Right.
So I did that, created a video, included some images that I generated with.
Yeah. What program do you use for that?
So for images, I use mainly Mid Journey.
Mhm.
So I was using Mid Journey, and then when I turn images to videos, which I then kind of clip together as frames, I use Runway,
Okay.
Runway ML. So yeah, did that. The campaign was successful. So on the front end, I see things like using AI as a way to be productive, as kind of like I see it mainly as an like a partner, right? A
Yeah.
thinking
Writing.
partner, right?
Yeah. A
Like,
brainstorm
hey,
part.
yeah. I have this thought in my head. What do you think, right? And we all know the thing hallucinates because it always wants to come up with
Yeah.
an answer. So you have to be able to discern through the hallucination. But that's why you're there, to be able to discern.
Yeah.
Okay, you're hallucinating, you're tripping. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so back and forth. I see it like with music, is like a duet between you and the machine.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. I'm actually going to be teaching a class on writing with AI because I think that I think a lot of writers just want to poo-poo AI and say like, oh, it's going to replace us, and they get scared and they run away from it, or they, even saying the sentence AI and writing in the same sentence is, to some people
Yep.
very. But you'd be crazy to not take advantage of some of its, as long as you see it as a, like a, not a replacement, but as a, like you said, like a partner, like a brainstorming partner that can
Mm-hmm.
help, make you a little bit more efficient. I mean, I don't know what I would do without AI at this point, because I'm doing so much writing at this point in my career,
Yep.
just for different people. And I need it to help me organize stuff, help
Yep.
me, it's not writing stories for me, but it's certainly helping me outline. It's helping me, fix grammar,
Yep.
me
Exactly.
doing transcripts, whatever it is. Like, anyway, I
Yeah.
mean, even this, like this interview, like I can use AI to do the editing, which would normally take me
Hours.
um, hours,
Yep.
can take 15 minutes.
Yep.
So
And
yeah,
and
so
to
you'd
be
be crazy
honest,
not to take advantage of it. Yeah,
it's just becoming mainstream, right? Some of these things have had AI applications just in the back, right? Neural networks have been around for since like the 60s. So it's just now there's just more data, right? And you know, computing power is going next level. So if you add massive computing, mass data, that's why we're where we're at right now. But the technology, the premise, the whole thing about a neural network being able to connect ideas and connect words or predict the next word based on just statistics, it's it's just like a natural evolution, right?
mm,
From a text based. What I find interesting is how the data for things that are not text driven, how they
mm-hmm,
would how that data will be recorded, right? So someone like myself, right? And it's something I explore a little in the book, Musta's Mixtape, around um, sound, right?
mm,
Um, you know, coming from Nigeria, a lot of our history, for instance, right, from back in the days, is more oral history
right,
compared to text, right? And there's advantage to recording your history, right? Whether it's by
mm-hmm,
text or sound. But with sound, there's so many other things. There's the pitch, there's the timbre, there's the you can allocate everything to a frequency and amplitude, but there's pitch, and when you now start talking about music, there's like harmonics and all this kind of different data points, so different from just like a text, letter by letter,
right,
right? So
yeah. So how do they? Yeah.
yeah, so
How will AI be able to detect patterns or whatever it is? Well,
exactly.
it's interesting. I just was listening to a podcast about how they're using AI to try to figure out the language of whales, because whales,
Mm.
they've recorded a lot of whales singing. They sing to each other,
Mm-hmm.
but humans can't quite figure it out. But they're trying to figure out, if they put it into an AI, a huge AI, listening to the different patterns, is there a way that they can sort of figure out what whales are?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's very interesting. And to be honest, like the next the next 6-7 years are going to be quite
Crazy.
fascinating. Yeah. And
I hope for the better, because we saw what happened with the internet. Everybody was so excited in the
I
beginning, and then
know, you know,
these things.
I was listening to a podcast and there was this guy, um, yeah, 'cause rich tech people, right?
Yeah,
And giving selling the promise of like, oh, it's going to be great. It's just going to be
yeah.
great for them. And I'm just like, it's
We're
always great
disrupting.
for people that are in the advantage, right? There's always
Yeah.
inequality. There's a huge chance inequality would increase if
Mm-hmm.
a few people have access and people don't have access. But there's always
Yes.
this narrative around tech driven people that, oh, this is always good for us. Yes, human beings is always we always create new tools, but this one is some people have access, some people don't, right? And even with what we're talking about with AI, we're privileged when a country there's electricity, you can hop on your laptop, you can start prompting right away. Some people don't have that access, right? And even with all the stuff with AI and how it scales, the models can get to a point where it's like, okay, this is almost like a human being, but can it scale? Can
Mm-hmm.
Do we have enough electricity to compute at this scale that everybody has access to it? No, we don't.
No,
So I feel like there are things in the conversation that is not being spoken about, which is like the infrastructure
you can see what's coming. Yeah.
behind and how it affects us as human beings, So it's kind of what, a little bit talking about that in the book, is kind of a little bit on my exploration through fiction,
Mhm.
because to be honest, nobody, I don't know if we know how this is going to play out, but is
Yeah, but it is going to play out. And your book is set right in 2049, right? So it's
yes,
in the future,
yes,
the not so distant future.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's going to be quite interesting. I'm taking the approach of leaning into it and just like experimenting, as you said, writing with AI. Like, I don't think any writer should.
Fear it.
Yeah, I don't think you should not use it. Like, use it to write. Use or write the way you want to write. Right? If you want to go to a mountain and just take a pen and paper, feel free, do that. But when you're in front of a computer, maybe use it to research. Right? You've always wanted to write a book about the 30s, right? Use AI as a research companion to get you stories
Hmm.
right away, right? So for me, I'm just like, it's a tool you can use to do some of the things you want. Why would you limit yourself, right?
Right.
So I just think the more people lean into using these tools, I'll tell you something that is interesting. And you, John, you might find this quite interesting, right? 2 days
Yeah.
ago or last week, a friend of mine sent or colleague sent something called Notebook LM. So I don't know if you've heard of Notebook LM.
No.
So
Notebook LM.
yes, check
Okay.
them out. All right. So it's Google's version. it's
Uh.
it's Google keep on on crack. But yeah, but anyways, is in a good way. It's Google's version of using your personal notes and
Mm.
adding an AI component to it. So they claim they don't train the model on your notes, but it's now you can put all your notes in there and you can ask it interesting questions. You can ask it things like, how have my thoughts changed about the writing landscape over the last 10 years? And if you have things about writing and you've, put a date
Mm.
to them, it can give you like, okay, you used to say this before, now you're saying this, right?
Mm.
I think that is very interesting because
Yeah.
I don't have to go through all my notes to find out what I was saying. This thing has kind of
Yeah.
looked through it. That's one thing. But then 3 days ago, they released a feature, right, called a podcast. So literally, yeah, you should try this out. You might find it very.
Okay.
Literally, I took a link from my website of my recent article, right? I put that link into this thing. It annotates it and creates a 6-minute podcast of two people discussing my article. It sounded like it was so good. I sent it to my friends and I was like, oh man, I finally got featured on a podcast.
Oh my God.
And they were like, some of my friends were like, finally, man, it's time that people recognize. I was like, okay, first, it's AI. But it was so good.
It was your voice. It was your voice, huh?
It wasn't my voice. It was two people, right?
Oh, talking about your
talking
ideas.
about it. And they call their podcast The Dive. And they were like, oh, Nifemi is such a great guy. The thing about Nifemi is he actually puts the work in, especially what he says. And it was very good. It was very good. Now,
as long as it's not replacing podcasters. Yeah. I mean, that's scary, right?
That's what I'm saying.
By the way, everything I do always gets replaced. It's like I got into print magazines. Those went away. Then I got into video. That's going away. Then now podcasts. I can't win.
When does it end?
When does it end? When do I don't know. I don't know the solution. But anyway, it sounds interesting, but also sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's real, so I can't deny it. But I mean, I think people are going to want to hear humans. I mean,
For
you
sure.
and I, the conversation we're having today, like, I don't think AI could have it because we're going, we're like following threads of conversation. Like, it's not so.
You could tell. Tell it was kind of,
right.
But for people,
I hope.
For people that maybe don't care about this organic thing, they're just going to be hitting that production.
People want information. Yeah, I guess you could do it.
And don't get me wrong, they were kind of coming up with some random stuff that I didn't write, right? So there's that aspect.
They're hallucinating.
They were hallucinating together. So, but it's interesting.
Oh, I like. All right, so you fed it an article. All right, I'm going to try it. Maybe I'll put an episode up on my podcast and see if people can tell if it's real or not.
Yep.
Test.
You need to try it.
All right, Nifemi, always fascinating talking to you.
For sure.
I'm so glad that you were an early. I hope all my listeners are like you, like such a deep thinker and so talented in many, many different ways.
Thank you.
And always pushing yourself to try new things. You're really a great inspiration.
I appreciate that.
The book is called Mustafa's Mixtape.
So it's
not Mustafa.
Yeah. I knew a lot of people. It's Musta's Mixtape. Musta,
not Mustafa.
Yeah.
Mustafa's from The Lion King.
Yep.
Musta's Mixtape. And it is, I'm excited. It's out now. Where can you find it?
So you can find Musta's Mixtape on Amazon.com. You could get it in ebook, paperback, and you can also get it at your local bookstore. If they don't have it there, you can ask them to order it. It's going to be a great book. It's dystopian, but a lot, satire, bringing in some technology, bringing in some. My main thing is how do you embed some soul into the technology? And I think that's the question that Musta's Mixtape tries to answer. So I hope you get it. I hope you read it and, connect with me. You can find me on Twitter, Nifemi at Nifemi _Aluko _. There's an underscore at the end. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Nifemi Aluko. Those two places you can connect with me. But yeah, looking forward to people reading Musta's Mixtape.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. Thank you again for coming on the show and being such a supporter. Always yours.
For sure. Thanks for having me on, John. I really appreciate you and, all you're doing. And don't worry, like the podcast, with people like us, we're not listening to any other podcast but the ones that we trust. So, so we're set.
It takes a while to build trust. Trust doesn't come. A ChatGPT can't trust it. We know
exactly. We never knew.
I hallucinate, but in different ways.
In different ways.